Thank you for listening to the Gateway to the Rockies podcast from Visit Aurora from the rafters of the Stanley Marketplace. This is the show dedicated to telling the stories of Aurora, Colorado. Hi there, I'm Dave, Senior Marketing Manager for Visit Aurora. The Colorado Freedom Memorial is the first memorial in the United States dedicated to all wars and all branches of service, containing the names of all those who died from a single state in those wars. Today we're joined by the founder and executive director of the Colorado Freedom Memorial and the board chair for Visit Aurora, Mr. Rick Crandall. Rick, thank you for taking the time today.
Of course, board chair, I had to show up, right?
Absolutely. For 30 years, you were one of the prominent voices of the metro area on Denver radio, program director and morning show host on Easy 1430. But your radio experience began well before that during your time in the Air Force, right?
Yeah, 1976. Actually went into the Air Force, took a blind shot at getting into radio in the Air Force. I had to send an audition tape in from here at Lowry. I lived here, was from Aurora, and sent in an audition tape. But while I was waiting to hear whether I got accepted or not, I got chipped off to basic training. So I was down there hoping I was going to get radio. And if it wasn't going to be radio, it was going to be security police, which I would have been horrid at. So about halfway through basic training, I got a notice down there, said, yep, you've been accepted to the Defense Information School at the time. It was at Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indiana. And so began my radio career.
Because of my ignorance, the image that immediately comes to mind is Robin Williams.
Yep.
Was that your experience?
Yes.
Was it a similar kind of program that you were doing?
Yeah, I was. So I left there and was sent to Guam. Spent 15 months in Guam. Did the morning show. My first shift when I got there, they said, "Hey, we're going to have you do mornings," and it was surprisingly like Robin Williams and Good Morning Vietnam. That was 4 years after 3 years after the end of the Vietnam War, and so there was still remnants of Vietnam there in Guam. Yeah, but the morning show was just, it was like that. It was just, I was speaking to the military guys on base, right? That's where we were broadcasting to. I'd finish my show. I'd walk over to the dining hall that was just across the way, and they'd be there waiting with my breakfast for me when I got there, and it was all very much like, this is pretty cool stuff.
I feel like all radio people know the answer to this question. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you remember the first song you ever talked up?
Yeah, let's see. It was late 70s, so it could easily have been Barry Manilow. It could have, Weekend in New England was big then. I'll take that as a stab, but yeah, a lot of 70s stuff and a lot of variety back then, even because just the range of listeners, the guys that were stationed there.
This is also, I think, a very common experience. Do you still have nightmares of dead air?
Yes.
Every day?
Yeah.
Or often?
Yeah.
I do too. I can't get into the control room.
Yes.
For some reason. The computer won't work. The transmitter has fallen over. That never leaves you, does it?
And the other thing that doesn't leave you, it's been 2 years now since I left radio, and I still find myself in the car talking up posts. I still find myself knowing that there's, this song's getting ready to end. Where's the dude? What are they going to do next? Yeah, the timing, that innate sense of timing that you develop is really kind of cool and freaky.
We're the only people that listen for the things between the songs.
Yeah.
We're far more interested in that, to the behest of our companions.
Yep.
We're way interested in the imaging and whoever the host is at the time.
And the other thing is to watching a football game when a commercial break stops, getting up, going out, grabbing something, and sitting back down before the game starts again, right?
You get really quick with all that.
You get really good.
To this day, you still connect with your audience via Facebook, with your breakfast club at Shady Acres. Congrats on 500 episodes, by the way, on that. That's really cool.
Thanks.
Why was it important for you to keep that connection with your audience?
When my show ended on the radio, it wasn't by my choice. It was simply because the owners decided to flip the format to a sports gambling. KZW was so unique formatically. There was nothing like it anywhere around, and largely anywhere in the country anymore. We had listeners all across the country because we played, everything. I'd drop a Glenn Miller record and then follow that up with something from, the Beach Boys or so. It was just a really eclectic mix of music, but it worked here partly because I just had a great reputation with all the people that listened, and they just kind of thought, this is so quirky and cool, I'm going to listen to it. Well, when it ended, I pre-recorded a 4-hour final show, which they proceeded to cut off after 2 hours. So I knew that people who listened later in the morning, which was a large part of my audience, they were going to wake up, turn on the radio and go, what happened, to have no explanation. So I decided, you know what, tomorrow morning I'm going to hop on Facebook and I'm just going to post something explaining what happened. And I did that the next day from the family room at my house, and I said, hey, I know a lot of you don't know why, what, how. Here's the deal. Here's where it is. How about next couple of days I'll just hang out with you here and we'll just kind of figure it out. A couple of days became a couple of weeks, became a couple of months, and now, 500 of these things later, a couple thousand people are dropping by every morning that's not a huge number in the world of social media, but for that little AM station and for those people, it's still important that we have this gathering. That audience, people in their 60s, early 70s, late 50s, where else are they going to go? There's no place else they were going to go find what we did. I can't put the music on the Facebook post, but I can put all the little features we did, and that's what we've done.
And it's valuable. It absolutely is. I think one of the seminal moments of your career, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for the 50th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, you were able to interview 7 survivors. Can you speak to how powerful that experience was?
Yeah, and powerful enough that it actually changed the course of my life from that moment forward. And it was very early on. It was the first year at KZW, 1991. And I still hadn't quite connected with the audience. When I walked in, I was, 91. I was 36 years old, and the average age of the listener was 75 at the time. It was a really old audience. And we'd sort of kind of gotten close to one another, but I was still looking for that breakthrough thing. And I got a call from a gentleman named Irv Obermeyer, who became a dear friend and a mentor of sorts for me. And Irv said, hey, I'm a Pearl Harbor survivor. We're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the attack at Pearl. Would you like to have some Pearl Harbor survivors in the studio? And I said, God, that'll be great. Yeah. The thing about KZW at the time, people didn't like you talking. Play the music and shut up. I mean, that was purely what it was. And here was this guy in the morning now talking to them. Why are you talking? Well, that morning I had 7 Pearl Harbor survivors gathered around me in the studio, and I let them talk for an hour and a half. And the interesting thing to me was, as Irv and the others were sharing their story with me, I could see in their eyes that they were actually reliving it as they were telling it. You could tell when somebody really, they're seeing it. And I was taken with that. How powerful is a story that it's actually transporting the teller back to the actual event as they recount it? And then the fact that it was a military story interested me, because I knew we had a lot of World War II veterans that were listeners of the radio station. So it was that day, that moment, that I was set on the path that's taken me where I am now.
Well, and in 2000, you broadcasted from the Normandy American Cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach, one of the seminal locations on D-Day, which turned the tide for the Allies in World War II. Yep. I can't imagine the feeling of that place, the energy that you must have felt. Is that experience tied with talking to the veterans from Pearl Harbor? Is that kind of what initially sparked the idea of the Colorado Freedom Memorial?
And in fact, that broadcast was intended to be the kickoff of a 1.5-year tribute at the radio station to World War II veterans. At that point in 2000, we were 55 years after the end of their war. They were starting to age out a bit. They were getting into their early 70s. The oldest of them may be approaching 80. And I figured this is our last chance while they're still with us to really let them know how appreciative we are. So we kicked it off with that broadcast and finished it on December 7th of that year aboard the USS Missouri in Pearl Harbor, with Irv Obermeyer sitting right next to me on the deck of the Missouri as I broadcast back to Denver. So we started in 2001, December 7th. We finished with the 60th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. But it was those events. I will tell you, at Normandy, I did the broadcast. We had some great guests on. I was in a tool shed doing the broadcast because it was where I could get to a telephone line to hook up the old radio equipment back in the day. And And we finished up. We were getting close to the end, and the superintendent of the cemetery said to me, "Hey, Rick, we're done." It's like 5 p.m. then there. He said, "We're all finished for the day." He said, "We're wrapped up. When you're done, just wrap up your stuff, close the door, and if you wouldn't mind, just when you leave, pull the gate shut behind you." And I looked at him and I said, "I'm not usually entrusted with that kind of adult responsibility. I just pull the gate shut." He said, "Look, that's my house right over there." I said, "Okay." So we packed everything up, put it in a rental car we had, and I turned around and looked, and there was that cemetery with over 9,000 crosses and Stars of David, and there was the English Channel and the cliffs at Omaha Beach that they had come up. It was all right there, and it drew me back into the cemetery. I turned around, I walked back in. The only living person in that cemetery at that moment was me and all of them. And it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. And I'm certain the seed was planted then for the Colorado Freedom Memorial. Irv had kind of led it to me, earlier. That event kind of closed the deal.
One of the things I love about radio is the true spirit of community that can form through it when it's done right. You opened your life to your audience during your time on KZW, and they become a part of it. And one of the rewards of that is they stepped up and contributed to the construction of the memorial. That had to be so affirming.
Yeah. I mean, it really. Look, I was this radio guy who thought, I'm going to build this memorial. How long can that take? 5-6 months? How long can it take to actually do this? This got to be the easiest thing. Well, it took 12 years.
Yeah.
And the reason it took 12 years is because I refused to put corporate logos on the memorial.
Right.
We were going to put the names of those from Colorado killed in action on that memorial, and that was it. And if you got that, great. Lockheed Martin, they got it. They gave us a donation. Others did. But the big corporations in Colorado didn't, because they couldn't understand why I wouldn't put a bronze plaque on there with their logo. And so it took the listeners of that radio station. And frankly, I had 10 years into this fundraising project, we were still $400,000 short of what we needed to build it. So I did a fundraiser. I did a radiothon from Dry Dock Brewing Company here in Aurora on Memorial Day of 2012. And I had decided to myself, without saying a word to anybody, that if we don't raise the money in this broadcast, I'm going to fold this up. I've been carrying it forever, right? At that point, 12 years. If I can't raise it now, we've tried, it's great. We go through the whole day, we get to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we've raised $50,000, $60,000.
Yeah.
And I'm at peace with this. I've done everything I can. So I'm figuring at 6 o'clock when we sign off, after we're done, I'm going to tell my wife and everybody else, we're folding it up. We did our best. God bless you and everybody. Let's donate the money to a good veterans cause. My wife gets a call on her cell phone in the 5 o'clock hour from a guy who was a listener and a wealthy philanthropist here in town. He called her cell phone and he said, "Diane, how much money do you still need?" And she said to him, $335,000. He said, "I'll write the check."
Wow.
And she was like in shock.
Yeah.
To the point where she somehow got disconnected from him, and she thought, "Oh no!" And so she tried to call the guy back. He finally calls her and he's laughing and he says, relax. He says, "I'm good for it. I will get the money to you." He said, "Do me a favor." She said, "Anything." He said, "Tell Rick to shut up and play music now."
And it all comes full circle.
And so that was how it all came about. I mean, it's just an amazing story. The whole thing is so amazing. That donor who asked to be anonymous and has been anonymous to this day, Diane and I know him and nobody else, we took him out the night before we dedicated the memorial so he could see the memorial without being in the fuss of everybody else. His father had served in World War II and was killed aboard he was a commander of a submarine and was killed in Tokyo Bay in a bombing. His wife's uncle was killed in Korea, and his wife's uncle's name is on the memorial. So he had a connection to it. He loved the radio station, and so at a time when we needed it, it just was that, you get those little angels along the way that show up, and in this case, it was that.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Over 6,000 heroes are featured on the memorial. What was the process like for researching the honorees? Is it more involved than just asking for military records?
Yeah, in fact, you can't rely on military records. A lot of us that served in the military, I was in the Air Force 6 years. Military record keeping is right? I mean, it's like that. I mean, it's a pretty arduous task. For us, it doesn't stop. We still know we have 6,218 names in our database at this time. We know we still don't have them all. We just don't. You figure Spanish-American War that we start with through today, the records were kept on steno pads written in by pencil. Wow. And then when a pad was filled, they twined it all up, put it in a bag, brought it back home when the war was over, and that was the record of who was killed there. World War I comes along. We're starting to get into the infancy of manual typewriters, and so now they're taking old records, converting them to typewritten, cleaner records, but they're looking at the steno pads and going, gosh, is that an I or an L? Right?
Yeah.
And so begins this chain of unfortunate events that leads to misspelled names. That's why a lot of military memorials that you see, Vietnam Memorial in D.C., there are misspelled names there because we have to rely on some record to begin the process. So it's hard. We continue to research county clerks and newspapers and the Western History Collection down at the Denver Public Library, the Colorado History Colorado. We're getting close to a partnership with Fold 3, which is an offshoot of Ancestry.com. So we still keep searching. We've got volunteers that do it for us, and I don't know that we'll ever have them all, but we're closer than any record that has existed to this point.
There are some poignant decisions that are made in the design of the memorial.
Yeah.
The names aren't in alphabetical order. The glass panels of the memorial lean, which creates a beautiful, stunning effect, particularly during sunset.
Yeah.
But there's a much deeper meaning behind those choices.
Yeah. The panels falling back and forth meant to symbolize men and women falling on the battlefield. The names not in alphabetical order meant to symbolize the chaos of war. The top of the memorial, as you look at it, the panels are peaked. That was my only request in the design of the memorial. I am not an artist, but I have always had this romantic notion that most of those that left Colorado and didn't come home, those mountains were one of the last things they saw from home when they left, either by train or plane or however it happened. And I wanted those mountains reflected in the memorial, and that's the peaked tops that you see. All of it, when you go out there, it's really pretty cool. I mean, you can see the memorial and go, gosh, that's cool. But then when you learn these little histories, which is why we need a visitor center.
The Colorado Freedom Memorial is dedicated to all of the Colorado veterans killed in action since Colorado became a state in 1876. Just off the top of your head, do you recall the first name and which conflict they served in?
So Spanish-American War is the first war after Colorado became a state, and we're pretty sure that we've now identified the first one, and it was Fred Springstead from Golden. Wow. Fred was actually got married in San Francisco. When they left Denver and went by train to San Francisco and were getting ready to board ship, his fiance had chased after him out there, met him there, and they got married there before he got on the ship and left. Fred was a cook, and so by all rights shouldn't have been anywhere near shooting, right? He should have been. But one night he said to his boss in the kitchen, look, I didn't come all this way just to cook. I need to go up front. And so he was allowed to go up that night after everything was cleaned up. He reported to the front, and sometime that night, while he was in his foxhole, he stood up to ask somebody in a foxhole next to him a question, and a sniper killed him. And Fred became the first Coloradan killed in action since we became a state. One of 48 from Colorado killed in the Spanish-American War, so he's first.
And what's amazing is all 6,000 plus have stories that are worthy of being told and deserve to be remembered.
And unfortunately, with military records, all you get is name, rank, serial number, maybe where they died, when they died, but maybe where. I know very, very little about the men and women on our memorial, which makes me sad, and which has really led to us making a real concerted effort to get people to share stories they know of family members who were killed in action so that we can share their stories and tell their stories.
One of the poignant things you immediately notice at the memorial is all of the flags on display are at half-mast, regardless of what's going on in the world at the moment. That was a conscious decision and a powerful statement.
Yeah, one of 5 places that we know of in the country that display flags like that permanently. And for us, it was recommended to us by the chief of military protocol for the state of Colorado. She said, there's nothing that says you can't. And in your case, because we're not only a memorial, but of the 6,200, near 4,000, their remains never came back to Colorado. They're either buried overseas or they were lost at sea, shot, whatever the circumstances. And so for those families, they never had a grave site to go to. So when they come to the memorial, it's their grave site. Yeah. When we built that memorial and put those names up, it was the first time that their loved one had a presence here at home. So you see Gold Star families come out every day to the memorial and go and just kind of sit by their loved one's name, or men and women who served with them, maybe saw them die on the battlefield or served beside them. They come. So we're not only a memorial, but we're actually almost part cemetery as well, because it becomes a final resting place. So that's why we permanently display the flags that way, and people absolutely love it when they understand the reason.
What are some of the reactions that you get from family members when they see the memorial?
From very quiet and don't talk. I have a Vietnam veteran that comes and will sit out in his car in the parking lot, but has never come up to the memorial. Wow. It's too close for him. To obviously emotional, some crying. But interestingly, about 3 years ago, a lady named Sherry Bush, whose son Andrew Rydell is on the memorial, killed in Iraq. And I've known her for a long time. She's been on some panels with me. She's a good close friend. One day she was out. She said, I'm happy when I'm out here. And I thought, what the heck? Happy? I said, what do you mean? And she said, when I go to his grave, it's real. He's there and there's nothing I can do about it, and he's that close, and I've lost him, and I'm reminded when I see his grave of the call and the knock on the door and all of the bad that went with it. She said, when I come here to the Colorado Freedom Memorial and stand in front of his name and see it, when I see his name, all that come back are happy memories to me here.
And points of pride.
Correct.
Wow.
So she said, here, and I was like, that, I never would have imagined that, right? And since then, I've had a couple of other Gold Stars, unprompted, tell me the very same thing. And for folks that don't know, I think I tend to forget, a Gold Star family, Gold Star, if your loved one is killed in action, you become a Gold Star mother or sister or husband or uncle, or so you become a Gold Star family member. And we have a pretty good group of Gold Star family members that have kind of been really supportive of the memorial, love what it means, and we have a Gold Star family father and mother who are on our board. Pretty remarkable, and I've learned a lot from them.
The memorial is unique in that you have the unenviable and dreadful task of adding names.
Yeah.
When losses occur. In a perfect world, another name would never be added to the memorial. But when that happens, is there a process before a name is added to the memorial?
Yeah. Interestingly, it's a glass memorial, right? And when we dedicated the memorial, when we had it built and dedicated, the Italians had just come up with a new process for printing on glass. And so the Freedom Memorial, we have two very thick, like inch and a half thick pieces of glass, and in between them, a wafer thin piece of glass on which the names are printed. So in order to add names to the memorial, we have to replace an entire panel. Well, the glass was done by Viracon, the largest commercial glass producer in America in Minnesota, and each panel of glass on the memorial is different. So it's expensive when you have the largest glass producer in the country shut down and custom fit for your project 21 different sizes. That's expensive. In fact, all the glass on the memorial as it sits right now, $450,000, almost $500,000 in glass. So we had vandalism out there about 5 years ago. A piece of glass was shattered. It was the only piece of glass on the memorial that didn't have anything on it.
Wow.
And it was the smallest piece of glass on the memorial, and it was $45,000 to replace it, right? So we can't do that often. When we replaced that piece, we were able to to add 120 names that we had discovered since we dedicated the memorial. So we got those up. What we're about to do is something we've done in the past. We're going to do it again. We're about to put in a granite slab, and on the granite slab, we'll etch names as we discover them. We call it the transition stone, and it's the transition between, okay, they're here and they're recognizing them, and then eventually we get them to the memorial with the others they served with or from other conflicts. So
I love throughout the year that the memorial becomes a gathering place for the community. Can you talk a little bit about some of the events that is held throughout the year at the memorial?
It is really, look, I'm the radio guy who thought, I'm going to build this thing, and then that's it. I'm done. See ya. I'm out of here. Right? And we dedicated it, and I thought, phew, thank goodness, 12 years. Here it is. See ya. I'll go back to our studio, sitting there in the morning, drink some coffee, share some chuckles. And I walked away, and like 2 days after we dedicated it, I was kind of tugging at me again that you're not quite done with this thing here yet, Junior. So why? What else needs to happen? And the first thing that we did was we came up with this event called Luminarias that we do in November now. We do it the 3 days around Veterans Day. So it's usually a Thursday. It is a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. For 3 hours each of those nights, we display in the park 6,218 glass jars, individual glass jars, each with an LED candle in it. And at 4:30, a crew comes and turns those candles on. Volunteers come and turn them all on. At 8 o'clock, another crew comes and turns them all off. We do it for 3 nights, a jar for each name on the Colorado Freedom Memorial. It's a week-long process. The first day of the week, we have a volunteer group come out, and they template the park. Spray paint little dots, 6,218 dots where each of the jars will go. And the reason for that is because then we have the 3rd grade class from Indian Ridge Elementary School in Aurora. We have the 3rd grade class come out, and they place all the jars for us. And for the 3rd graders, the entire 3rd grade class, it's a day to learn about service and sacrifice. For us, it's an opportunity. The first couple of years, we place the jars. At 6'2", it's pretty far down to put the jar down on the ground, but when you're a 3rd grader, you're halfway there.
There you
right?
go.
So,
efficiency.
Yes, indeed. Plus unbounded energy after you feed them a Snickers and turn them loose. So we use the kids, and then we have the 3 nights of the lights. Why the lights? We call it Light Their Way Home. Mm-hmm. We wanted to do something near the holidays, but it would have been gross to put Santa Claus on top of the memorial, right, with the sleigh and the reindeer. I mean, we couldn't do that. What could we do in this light? I mean, light is such a symbol of the holidays. Mm-hmm. This light, and so we have the 6,200 lights. Some of them flicker, and it looks to give motion to it, and so in that very nature, kind of gives life. And people, we had our largest crowd that we've ever had over the last 3 nights this last year. It's become very popular. That event, and then the event we do Memorial Day weekend, which is not so much for the Gold Star families to come out and pay respects, but it's for the community to be able to come Memorial Day weekend, take an hour and a half out of your day, come out and remember what it's all about. So those are really our 2 big events. We have events all year long. Buckley Space Force Base, folks from out there use it all the time for promotion ceremonies, retirement ceremonies, blah, 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 blah. So it's a pretty busy place.
I imagine this year in particular is going to be busy. It's the 10th anniversary of the memorial's dedication. What are some of the plans for that commemoration?
Yeah, it's crazy, and I'm in the middle of sending out all kinds of requests for support right now. Just yesterday, I invited the U.S. Air Force Honor Guard and Drill Team to come out from Washington, D.C. to be a part of the ceremony. They've been out twice at the memorial, and hopefully we'll get them again. We'll have military flyovers. We're going to have living history exhibits with reenactors, and on and on. It's going to be a special day. The Sound of the Rockies men's chorus from here in Denver, who was there the day we dedicated it, will be back to perform. They're brilliant. And we'll have some special guests and other things that'll happen. It's going to be a pretty 10 years. I mean, that one, it goes by ridiculously fast. And 2, at the 10th anniversary, we'll be able to really launch for the public the next project, which is the Visitor and Education Center that we're in the middle of raising money for now.
It's the evolution of the Colorado Freedom Memorial and Education Center. What does that project mean, and where are we at with it?
We have now for 10 years had this beautiful memorial and 2 additional monuments that we've put out there. The Gold Star Families Memorial Monument, when the fallen, when the men and women we honor on the memorial are killed on the battlefield, their war ends. Their families just begins. Mm-hmm. And for the families, the battle lasts often much longer than their loved ones did, right? They carry that the rest of their lives. So it was important that we have a memorial in honor of them, and we do. And then we have the granite pillars at the base of which is soil from American military cemeteries around the world. We have 8 pillars representing 8 countries where Coloradans from World War I or World War II are buried. From France, from the Meuse-Argonne Cemetery, we have soil from the gravesite of John Buckley, who Buckley Space Force Base is named for. We have soil from his grave across the street. So we have all those monuments. We don't have a building. We have Mother Nature, for some reason, has been okay with us being out there year-round and not, we did have one time we had to evacuate to the Beck Rec Center because of a tornado warning. Yeah. We did, stuff like, but we've not had to ever cancel one of our programs because of weather. So we're about to run out of luck. I think we need to get this visitor center where we can go indoors. One, it becomes a gathering space for anybody that comes to the memorial. It's your starting point. We're going to have a 150-seat theater in the place where we can do presentations from historians, authors, veterans, and others to educate people about this cost of freedom and what we do, how we remember. It'll have a classroom for the kids on the field trips that come out. At this point, they get out there, they get off the bus, we walk them up, show them the memorial, they ooh and ah, they get on the bus and leave. I want there to be one step required before they get to the memorial, and that's to teach them a little bit. Yeah. I want to get them in a classroom.
Give them context.
A little understanding for what they're about to walk out and see before they walk out and see it. So we'll have a classroom there. We'll have an exhibit hall. We just found out earlier this year that we are being awarded, really, a piece of steel beam from the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor, not from the actual ship that's sunk there where the memorial is, but after the attack at Pearl, when they were clearing the harbor, the ships that sank, like the Arizona, still had masts above water. So they cut them off below the water line and towed them to shore, and they've been there ever since. 80 years they've been over. And so we're getting a 4-foot section of beam from the Arizona that we'll have in an exhibit hall on the second floor of the visitor center. It's really going to be a beautiful facility and have a big purpose in the community. So we've started raising money. We just received a $1.5 million grant from Representative Crow's appropriations package. It's a quarter of what we need to raise. So that seed money will really get the fundraising part fired up now. So this week, we at the city council meeting, they unanimously approved a proposal that was presented by council member Zavanik and Jurinsky. They had a proposal to approve the memorial for inclusion in the park where the visitor center in the park where the memorial is. It passed unanimously. So now we proceed with approval. So yep, that's the next thing. I'm really excited. We're in the middle of building everything that's going to happen in the building once it's open. We have the design firm hired, architects hired that are designing the building. So it's pretty exciting. Versus the first time when it took 12 years. Yeah. I told everybody when I said, okay, let's do this. I don't have 12 years this time, right? I mean, I don't expect to go anywhere anytime soon, but I'm older now that what I'd like to do is get it built and then have a few years in it just to see what we can do in there. And it's going to face the Freedom Memorial, and Christopher Kenton, who designed the Colorado Freedom Memorial, is designing the visitor center. So it's going to be pretty cool.
I'm sure you've heard this ad nauseum, but thank you for all your hard work on this. It is invaluable. It's an important part of our history. It's an important part of Colorado's history, and it's important to these families and to our community. So thank you for all your hard work and dedication to all this.
Of course. No, I appreciate that. And I wish, I think I know now, at the very beginning, I'd get asked all the the time. What made you want to do this? Why did you do this? What was it that made you want to do this? And for the longest time, I didn't have a good answer because I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew the broadcast. I knew something about that had caused this. And then I recalled that during that broadcast, the superintendent of the cemetery would bring guests up for me to talk to. And he brought a guy up from California, and the guy looked really cranky. They're coming up the walkway to this where I'm sitting. And the guy came in, he kind of plopped down, and I said, "Hey, so what brings you? You've been here before?" And he's like, "Nope, my first time I've been here." It's okay. I said, what brings you here? He said, "My brother's buried here." I said, "Okay. First time you've been here?" He said, "Yeah, I figured I'm getting older now. I figured I needed to come see this." He was my best friend. He was the person I was the closest to. And when he was killed, the government asked my dad if he wanted him to be buried overseas in a cemetery with others that died here, or sent home. That was an option families had. And his dad decided to have him buried overseas. They had grieved once. Mm-hmm. If we bring him home, we have to go through the whole thing again. I get that. Right. He didn't get that. It made him angry. He said, "I decided right then and there, it wasn't the Germans that killed my dad. It was my dad, or killed my brother. It was my dad." And he said, "I hated him for the rest of my life." And he said, "I didn't have a relationship with him, and so there." And I said, "So you're here now?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Do me a favor. After you go out to see your brother, stop by and see me again." He said, he got up and out he went. A couple hours went by, and I thought, well, he blew me off. Okay,
right.
Whatever.
It happens.
And then I see him. Here he comes. He's coming back up the walkway, and he plops down in front of me, and his eyes are puffy. I knew he'd been crying. I could tell. And I said, "So?" And he said, "My dad was right. This is where my brother should have been." I said, "Oh." He said, "Now, how do you repair a relationship with your dad that's no longer here?"
Yeah.
And off he went. And I thought, wow. And I think somehow in the back of my mind, I was thinking after that, how many other families must there be like that? Because they're, like I said, the 4,000 of them never came home. Often somebody's decision to have them buried overseas somewhere. In those American military cemeteries, I think there's like 2,600 Coloradans that are buried in total in those. How many families had that difficult decision? We're not bringing him home. We've grieved. Let's let him lie where he or she was killed in action, and how many people were torn up by that. And so maybe this is some way this memorial maybe could make it right. So if we've accomplished that, that's cool.
It's powerful, Mr. Rick Crandall. I got just a couple more questions before I let you go here. Tell me a little bit about the podcast you're involved with the Wings Over the Rockies Museum. That seems like a fun project. It looks like you're having a blast doing it.
I'm having a total blast doing it. John Barry, who's the CEO, President and CEO at Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum, has been a friend for a while. He was superintendent of Aurora Public Schools for a while. He was, he's got a retired two-star general. He's, had a great military career. I've known him for a long time and had done things with Wings Over the Rockies off and on during my radio time. But they reached out to me one day and they said, "Hey, we're thinking about doing this podcast." They have a PBS television program called Behind the Wings, which airs on Rocky Mountain PBS. I think now it's 4 times a year, but they wanted to do a companion podcast, and they asked if I'd be interested, and I jumped at it. I mean, I'm a kid from the 60s who remembered being in Aurora, Colorado in 1969, July, when Neil Armstrong was walking on the moon, sitting in my front yard, swearing to God I could see Neil on the moon. I can see him. So I grew up around aviation in the Air Force. My dad was in the Air Force. The sound of jets I could listen to all day. So I jumped. I said, please. And so we're now into the second season, halfway through the second season of the Behind the Wings podcast, and it's all about aviation. And we've had people on everywhere from Jimmy Doolittle's granddaughter to Eileen Collins recently, who was the first female pilot and then commander of a shuttle mission. Now we've interviewed some people who have created these drones that are now flying human organs at Native American at reservation land because of the inaccessibility. They're delivering blood when they need transfusions and stuff by drone. And I mean, just all the things are related to aviation. And it's really been fun. I love doing it. And, it's become kind of popular. I guess it's got a really crazy ranking as far as aviation podcasts go in the States. So, yeah, I think we have just a couple of interviews left to do for season 2. It's kind of weird how podcast seasons work. They're kind of different than any other broadcast season.
We're making it up as we go go along.
True.
It seems.
Absolutely
no
true.
best practices from corporate on this.
So we're about getting close to the end of 2, and I'm sure there will be a 3. But yeah, it's a blast.
You gave it wasn't a scolding. It was almost like a football coach inspirational speech at the end of the Armed Forces breakfast and acknowledgement a few months ago, and it was powerful. You grew up in Aurora. What does this place mean to you?
You know, we moved here in 1969. My dad had been in Vietnam for a year. We waited in Tucson, Arizona while he was in Vietnam, and then got word that he was going to be stationed here, and he had asked for it. At that point in Vietnam, when you were coming home from Vietnam, they said, where do you want to go? And they were doing their best to try to give it to you. And he picked Lowry here in Denver because that had been where he had gotten his training early in his career in the 50s. So they gave him Lowry. We moved here in 69, early 69. And I've mostly, except for some time away in Colorado Springs and in Guam, I've mostly been here, right? And I'm incredibly proud of what the town has become. You know, it's like any city. We've had rough patches. We've had things that have happened here that have been unfortunate. We've, would take our fair share of do-overs if we could on things, but you move forward. And what I'm proudest about is how we've moved forward. And this meld of cultures that has happened here is just unbelievable. I can't get enough of it. You know, being a military brat, we lived in Africa for 3 years when I was really young, off base. So I'm familiar, from childhood with that. We lived in Germany. I travel. I was born at Port Hueneme Naval Air Station in Oxnard, California, right on the ocean. And so if I'm not near the ocean, like once or twice a year, I get a little bit restless, right? I love the world, and isn't it crazy that here in Aurora, with the number of languages that are spoken and the variety of cultures, you don't have to go far to see the world. I'm very proud of this city and what it's grown up to be, and soon, maybe in my lifetime, maybe just after, it's going to be bigger than Denver. Yep. It's going to have a bigger population. So, but what I don't like is that people in this town are reluctant to say they're proud they live in Aurora. There's still some stigma in the metro area about, oh, you live in Aurora. Stop it. Yeah, I do. So when I was on the radio, there weren't many people. Aurora was the butt of a lot of jokes on the radio in Denver. I was the guy that was saying, stop it. You know what? Yes, I live there. I do live there, and I like it there. So, and I still do. And now as board chair of Visit Aurora, it's pretty important that I say that I'm proud I live in Aurora, and I like it. But I do like this town. I like what it's growing. It's growing into its own skin. It's finding its identity. We're finding people that are dreamers and builders and see the potential and are coming to this town to help grow the new Aurora. And I just think it's a really cool time to be here.
When you come to Aurora, make sure you visit the Colorado Freedom Memorial in Aurora at 756 Telluride Street. You can also learn more at coloradofreedommemorial.com, and make sure to follow on Facebook and Instagram at Colorado Freedom Memorial. And also make sure you follow Rick Crandall on Facebook at rick.crandall. Rick, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Hey, my pleasure. Always good to be with you, Dave. Thanks.
Hey, thank you for listening to the Gateway to the Rockies podcast. Visit Aurora is the official destination marketing organization for the city of Aurora, Colorado, and acts as the primary liaison between meeting planners and hotel partners. As Aurora's Convention and Visitors Bureau, Visit Aurora's mission is grounded in showcasing Aurora as a premier destination for meetings, business, and leisure travel. Visit Aurora represents more than 75 plus hotel properties with 13,500 plus guest rooms and more than 1 million square feet of meeting space, including Colorado's largest resort, Gaylord Rockies Resort and Convention Center. As Colorado's third largest city, Aurora is located minutes away from Denver International Airport and showcases mountain views, memorable meeting spaces, and 250 plus international eateries that offer a unique experience for each and every visitor. As the gateway to the Rockies, Visit Aurora's role in the local community goes beyond marketing the city as a destination. The Visit Aurora team is here to assist you with your Colorado visit, from facilitating your meeting, event, or convention to helping you discover local flavor and attractions. Go beyond the boardroom in Aurora, Colorado. For more, visit us at visitaurora.com.